Before we start this episode of Q&A with SNA, we just wanted to drop in with a quick note that this particular episode, while absolutely incredible, does contain some themes and some stories that some listeners might find distressing, particularly those who have experienced homelessness or displacement or mental health issues around that area. So we wanted to just say take care while listening, and if you need any support at all, there are resources in the episode description below. We hope that you enjoy this episode if you choose to stick around and listen, because the Lighthouse Foundation do incredible work, and it is really important what they're doing in our community. So please stay around if you can and if you're able, and find out more from the founder of Lighthouse Foundation, Susan Barton.
Welcome back to Q&A with SNA. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Shane.
And today we're honoured to be joined in the podcast studio by Susan Barton, member of the Order of Australia and founder of the Lighthouse Foundation, one of Australia's most respected advocates for children and young people experiencing homelessness. This year, the Lighthouse Foundation is celebrating 35 years of changing lives, which is incredible. During that time, supported more than 1,500 young people through foster care, family support, therapeutic homes and community programs, while also becoming one of the country's leaders in training, research and advocacy. That is a mouthful of things to say about someone obviously doing incredible things in our community. Welcome to the podcast today, Susan.
Thank you, Andrea and Shane and everyone.
That is an intro that gives me goosebumps because you could only hope to be the sort of person that leaves a legacy like that in your life. And obviously you've worked really hard to get to a point where there's all those words to be said about what you're doing with the Lighthouse Foundation. Let's start with where the story started, because that's really important to understand why you've made the decision to do what you do. Tell us a little bit about that.
All right. Well, thank you. I love it when everyone tells everything in the interview. I think, oh, good, I don't have to
Done. We're all finished.
Talk about that.
Being quite an introvert, I often find it really difficult to talk, but then once I get going on my favourite subject of young people, and I'm really actually quite humbled to have been given this life and being really a conduit to many people putting in to make the Lighthouse happen. I always say that would never have happened if it hadn't have been the community coming and walking alongside me. I'd still be in an igloo, but now we've got, beautiful homes all over the place for young people that may not have been given that opportunity had Lighthouse not been there. But if you're asking how I started, it was by happenstance, really. I was an only child until I was 16, and then my mother had to have another child, which ended up feeling like one of my babies that I had early.
Yeah.
But I always wanted to be surrounded by siblings and never was. So I decided that I wanted lots of children. And after having my second one, I thought, oh, this isn't much fun. There must be an easy way to do this. And I'm always looking for easy ways out. And I met a group of Australians who were actually providing funds for an orphanage overseas, and I thought I'd love to do that, and maybe at the same time I can put an application into it to adopt my next child, which I did. And that was around the time of the fall of Vietnam, so all of a sudden the funds we were sending over there stopped, and we'd heard that a plane load of children died coming out to Australia to be relocated. And I thought, oh my gosh, I could have cared for some of those children. And this group of Australians redirected their money, and it happened to be Sri Lanka. And my application went to Sri Lanka as well. And we decided that not only were we going to send cots and blankets and money over, but Sri Lanka said that they wanted a nurse to go over and help all the young children and babies that were actually abandoned in Sri Lanka because there was a male policy. They didn't want too many girls.
Yeah.
And so it was mainly young babies that were girls that were abandoned. And so I thought, oh, gosh, we could do that. So we sent money over, and Danielle, a French nurse, wanted to go and do it. So she went and did it really free of charge, and we just sent money over to keep her going. But she got overwhelmed within the first few weeks, and I think she had 40 children on her own that had been picked up in the streets. And so she had an SOS saying, can anyone come and help? And I'd never been out of my suburb before, let alone overseas. And I decided that I'd like to go over and have an opportunity, if I did adopt from Sri Lanka, to see the country. So I went over, and as most people are shocked by third world countries that long ago, it was actually 45 years ago. And I was also shocked at the level of hunger these children had, and there was no one feeding them. And Danielle asked me to take a really sick baby to the infectious diseases hospital, which I did. And while I was there, I noticed a little baby in the far corner. And I didn't mention that I had 2 babies at home at the time. My mum kindly said she'd look after, and I thought I'd be gone a week, and it turned into a month. And while I was there, this little baby in the far corner had this laboured breathing, and I walked over his cot and I thought, oh my gosh, it's, severely malnourished and it can hardly breathe. And what I thought was thick black hair was in fact abscess scabies, and flies just encrusted all over his head. And I asked the nurse, I don't know what possessed me, if I could nurse this little baby, and she said yes, because again, in that time, you'd hardly see a doctor come in, and a particularly abandoned child, they had no worth. And so I remember rocking this little baby well into the afternoon and looking into his eyes and thought, gosh, you could be my child at home. And if anyone knows me, I'm territorial about my kids. You don't fuck with my kids. The claws are out and I'll scratch everyone. I've got 6 kids and 12 grandchildren, and I'm the same with all of them. They're sacred to me, and they need protecting, and I'm that protector. And I thought, why aren't I doing this with this child? And later on in the afternoon, I thought, actually, you are my child, because there's no one else here that's can own that responsibility. And I should be going to the embassy and saying I want to adopt, or I should be going and saying to the hospital and saying I'll give you a year's worth of food. And I put that baby down in that cot and found out the next day that he'd passed away, and passed away on my watch. And I came back to Australia a very different girl, one that knew that I couldn't live in the world and go on and have seen what I saw and do nothing. And yet who was I? I wasn't a social worker, and, I had no schooling. I grew up in public housing with a single mum, and I had to leave year 10 to help out with finances and support the family. So what on earth could I do? But the one thing I realised I had was a lot of love to give, and I thought, you know what, any child that's adopted in Australia and doesn't have a family, I'm committing to fostering that child. And I started doing that, and little did I know that there were so many children in Australia that after including, as years went by, including my own children, I'd reached, had 16 kids living with me, and I was looking to foster another child, a young man that came from Sri Lanka, and he was 4 and his adoption had broken down in Australia. So he'd already been left in Sri Lanka and then adopted. I've told you I can rub it on.
No,
That's all right.
I'm trying to translate this. It's very hard in 45 years, but I happened at the same time to be sent by my cousin, who thought I had, marbles in my head, to go and find health. He sent me to a course called Money and You, run by a fellow called Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and If You Want to Be Rich and Happy, Don't Go to School. And that one really sung to my heart.
Yeah.
And I did the course. Little did I know it was more about you than money.
Yeah.
However, Robert heard about what I was doing and tucked me under his wing. He was an extraordinary fellow, and he taught me about policies and procedures and franchising and about compound interest and about Buckminster Fuller. And he said, Sue, get up at the end of the seminar and tell everyone what you're doing, and we'll find a way of helping you. And I got up. Again, I hate talking in public. It's not one of my strengths, but I got up after throwing up all day and I said, look, I really need a caravan in my home for this 17th young person. He's desperate and I don't want him to be homeless. He's in a residential care now and he's languishing. And a fellow right up the back who owned Blackburn Hire stood up and he said, I'll help you, love. I've got a caravan. A week later, in the middle of June, an old, little old round caravan arrived. A week after that, Remy joined us, and a week after that, there was a torrential downfall and there was more rain in that little caravan there was on the inside. And then the kids all inside said, how can you talk about love and we're family and everything? And he's out there in the rain and we're in here. So it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, or made me grow up really and realise that I was only creating another resi care and I was losing track of each of these young people as individuals. And so I had to learn something different. And Robert actually helped me see that, and he helped me form a charity. He put a group of business people around me, much like you guys did in raising funds for Lighthouse, and they helped me form a charity. So then I could go out and raise funds, and our first lot of money was to provide a psychologist to Dr. Sarah Crome, who's still my friend today, and she followed me around for a year and looked at what I was doing innately that was having impact or outcomes where kids wouldn't enter the homeless system again and end up in juvenile justice or jail.
Yeah.
And since then, we've had Ernst & Young do an independent report on us, and Social Ventures Australia, each defining that 87% of our young people go through our system or program, never enter the juvie justice systems or go into jail, and stop that intergenerational trauma.
Yes.
Yeah.
And every dollar invested, which will sing to all of your hearts, invested into Lighthouse, gets a $12 return. It was
That's a
actually
fabulous
14.
return. Yeah.
And they said, we can't say 14, no one will believe you, so let's say 12.
Yeah.
And that still holds true today, whereas in government only 30% of young people exit homelessness for good. So the disparity between that is, why wouldn't you invest in our model of care when you know the efficacy of it is so far in advance of what's been happening so far for young people? But it's also a human response, not a transactional one, and that's the difference and the beauty of Lighthouse. We provide a family, not a transaction.
Yeah. Yeah, which probably makes it harder in terms of, like, the government can only do so much, right? Because you're at the end of the day, it's still team members who are employed to do those sorts of tasks in government facilities, whereas you're bringing together people who actually, not that those people don't care, but there's a
they
different.
Care till 5 o'clock, and then someone else comes to care,
Yeah.
and often kids will see 20 and 30 people. When you're feeling like you don't want to live and you want to exit the world, and someone says, wait till the next person comes on, what does that tell you? You're not worth having a relationship.
Yeah.
And I always say, and I never blame government because they're doing the best they can, but systems don't bring up children.
No.
People bring up children.
Yeah.
And that's why Lighthouse, we don't get any recurrent funding, but we're predicated on the backs of the generosity of the beautiful, magnificent community members that step forward and say, I'll help you, love, like the fellow with the, there's so many ways to help. You can become a volunteer. You can help us save the $200,000 it costs to put food on the table every year for our kids. You can join a committee. You can use your mastery in your given field to help, or not. You can say, actually, I want to come away and do something different. But we want everyone to be part of the healing for these young people so they don't just survive, they thrive, but also to help us parent them. You're like their aunties and uncles and big brothers and big sisters. We can't do it alone. I can't do it alone, and at the end of the day, I keep telling my kids, I've got one foot in the grave now. Something's got to change, and we've got to have lighthouses, a lasting legacy. So because it's a really unusual model of care, because relationships aren't easy to develop and be safe. So how have we done it in, it's really 45 years I've been going. They always deny me those first 10 hard years and give me the 35.
We'll give them to you.
Absolutely count them.
We counted them. So.
And, we just need people to step forward and help us parent them in whatever way that works for them, So we'd love to hear from, I hope I'm inundated with phone calls after today.
Absolutely.
People that want to, put their mastery to helping us build more homes, or there might be accountants out there that know someone that wants to bequeath a home because they've got no one to give it to, or lend us one for peppercorn rent, or help us, someone just donated a building to us next door, which now creates a huge big footprint for us to build multiple. But we need that intellectual property, because we're carers, we're not builders, and we need other people to come in and do that bit of the intricate work for us. So again, we parent our kids.
Are you just Melbourne based, or is it national?
Funny you should ask that, because our model of care, I've co-authored a book on our model of care, and it's now gone global. It was published in the UK and the US and in Portuguese and Japanese. And so we have people from around the world ringing saying, how do we get a lighthouse here? So I give my IP away free of charge to any country that wants to. And we'll do trainings throughout the world. It's so easy to reach Japan and everyone now. So we often have online teams and that talking to people. But we've had several people coming from overseas. Our 2 psychologists, last ones were one's still there and one's just gone back to the UK. He was came over from the UK to join us because there's nowhere around the world that operates like our model of care. And particularly for psychologists, they're so excited about it because they learn about in Winnicott and, all the Freud and everything about relationships are what keep children safe. But no one does it. It's that transactional welfare model. We teach them how to go and get the dole, and rather than how to, earn it, earn a living, but through something that they're passionate about.
There's been a lot of talk about how changing people's engagement in their communities can help with homelessness and with youth hope, people being hopeful for the future rather than thinking that it's all, everything's bad and I've got nothing. And often it is because they don't feel like they're engaged with what they're doing or with a community group. I think recently in New York, I was reading an article that said that they've increased funding for social programs, and that has had an impact on the amount of crime. It's an instant impact because people are engaged with something. They're becoming members of their community and feeling like they belong somewhere rather than they're just existing somewhere. And I think that's something that the Lighthouse does differently too, right? Like you're giving people purpose around what they're doing. So not just a transactional thing. You're saying to young people, you're part of us now. You belong here.
Yeah. And if we don't do that, guess who they belong to? And we wonder why houses are getting broken into. And we've got our jails packed, mainly by kids, who have been let to just languish because we haven't put the money in that early intervention to hold them and tell them they're loved. If they haven't got parents to do it, we need to step up and step in, and I just, I don't know why we aren't all like a truly civil society jumping in saying, what part can I play in this process? And do you know, one child's hurt and abused they say 5 minutes in Australia, but it's now every 2 minutes. And I think the other one was that 1 in 7 people experiencing homelessness are children under 12. We had 3 little children that came to us who, it was written up in the Age, so I'm not saying anything that's not public knowledge. Their father murdered their mother in front of them, decapitated her, put her in a case and dumped her in a park. He then took them for pastries. A week later, he was picked up. He was a jihadist, put in jail. Those children lost everything. They'd already been taken out of a community and brought over here. They didn't have language. They'd never hardly been in a bath. The little child of 2 was so stiff because she hardly had been taken out of her pram. The mother was his slave. And, and we think, that's just an anomaly. But we hear it time and time again. We heard of little Darcy being thrown off Westgate Bridge. Those stories come to us daily and weekly. We hear of them. We had another little 3 children who were getting ready to be taken home from school that day, and no one turned up for them because their father had murdered their mother in a domestic violence case. There's another 3 that are unaccompanied minors, homeless. Who do they belong to now? Where do they go? Often when they're put in the system, they'll be separated because foster carers can't manage 3 really traumatised kids, because trauma shows up in many ways. It's, breaking TVs or climbing on the roof or running on the road or whatever those things, or breaking the TV or disrupting the family. They don't want to bring those children home. So what Lighthouse does is repair those young people so that when they do enter a foster home, it'll be for the only foster care home they'll go to. Whereas in the system, although, everyone does a marvellous job, if they don't have that early intervention for a period of time under the watchful eye of a team of psychologists like Lighthouse does, then many of our kids have 40 placements before they end up in foster care.
That's
40
crazy.
placements, 40 different mums and dads, 40 different rules, 40 different, how many schools will they end up opting out of school, and then they get so far behind. What's the outcome for these kids?
I think it's really important as well that we talk about the fact that you don't have to. Sometimes people get overwhelmed with stories like this, and we've had these conversations with a couple of the other people we've had come in from charities where it's hard for the general public to listen to a story like this, and they think there's too much and I can't do anything. Like, what can I possibly do that is going to have any impact? And maybe we're also in a situation where people have got, I don't have a lot of disposable income myself. How am I supposed to help an organisation like Lighthouse? What are the sorts of smaller, if you break it down into smaller ways to be part of it, you don't have to be, some people can't go through the trauma of it themselves lots of people have their own trauma responses. Like, you can't necessarily sit in front of a young person who needs your help if you are going to be traumatized by all of that as well. What are some of the things that you see and that you suggest to people who want to be able to help in these sorts of situations?
Well, first of all, I'd say that protecting children is everybody's business, and it's easier to build stronger children than broken ones. And then I would say there's anything, the great thing is that you hardly get to see our young people. That's the job of the carers. So people don't have to worry, although unless you want to be a foster care, and we're always looking for foster carers for our young people. However, most of our volunteers are people that might be an accountant or a lawyer that'll come onto a committee or join the board, or it might be a psychologist who came to us. She said, look, I don't want to mind a child, but I'm a psychologist and I love writing. And we said, oh my God, can you help us? We want to find a way of getting rid of our $200,000 food bill. So I'm onto it. I'm going to start a pantry committee. And all of a sudden now we've got a pantry, and within the next few weeks, we'll be starting to look at a whole range of businesses who might like to just do that, is go out and buy food, and we've got a list of all the foods the kids love. It might be, I remember 35 years ago, this guy came in and he said, I'm a immigrant from Italy and Australia's been really good to me. I want to start a home for kids. And I said, oh, Ralph, it's such a big job. It's taken me 20 years to build where I am. Why don't you just tuck yourself under us and we'll support you doing it? Well, he ended up buying a block of land in Spring. First of all, he had a block of land he didn't realise he had attached to his big factory, and said, oh, do you want this? And I said, oh, yes, please. He said, oh, funnily enough, it's got a house on it. So we renovated one of the rooms to have a bathroom in it, and all of a sudden it was filled with kids. He went on then to, when his business was really successful, build buy a block of land in Springvale, and then the government came in and built a property on it, a 6-bedroom property. And so he's still in our lives today, 35 years later. There's people say, oh, look, I own a business that is a cleaning business. I can come in and clean the Lighthouse Youth Resource Centre, so that doesn't cost you. So we try to look at getting everything donated to us, so that everything that we do, all the money we raise goes into caring for our young people and providing the salaries of the carers who do the most extraordinary work. To me, I could genuflect every day and pay homage to those that want to do this work. So really people can come and support them. You might want to join a house committee and they meet of an evening and have a barbecue if you do want a little bit of interaction, but the care is always there to manage that. And you can, I keep saying, bring a passion fruit sponge, and hardly anyone even knows what that is anymore.
Shane quite likes it.
Yeah, I love a sponge.
And our CEO, Brenda Boland, now is, she's won the show's best sponge, so we always get one.
Okay.
Yeah.
But,
join a committee so that you can eat Brenda's sponge.
Exactly. But you can buy a pair of shoes for a young person. And what we would love is, if you just want a hands off, is that $5, buy a kid a cup of coffee by becoming a lighthouse keeper, and that $5 a week. We get no recurrent funding. So as accountants, you'd know how difficult it is to manage a budget.
Absolutely.
When you don't have that recurrent
Certainty.
funding.
Yeah, you don't have that certainty.
So if you would just give one orange juice a week or one coffee at $5 and hand it to a child by way of joining our lighthouse group, that is gold to us.
It's a small thing, but it makes such a difference.
Yeah. And so we have, so many different ways of volunteering. Really, it's about calling in and saying, I'm not sure what I want to do. I know I want to help. And we understand that a lot of people don't want to do the caring. They just want to use something, it might be a light touch or it might be a heavy one. They might say, actually, I'm really good at properties. I want to see the 50 properties that you want to put on a large block of land that we've been devising with our annuity and property committee of really smart operators that have been heads of Lend-Lease and Stonehenge and all that. Join them and help us build more homes for young people.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways that you can be part of it. And I think we will, as we always do and as we have done over the last number of months, make sure that our community knows how they can get in touch with the Lighthouse Foundation through all of the social medias and everything that are involved. So if anyone out there listening to this today wants to be involved, please be in touch with us and we can make sure that you get to the right places. Because I think it's important for people to know that you can make a big difference. Like Shane said, you can just buy a coffee for someone, or you can put a few dollars away from your wages every week towards something.
And they're all equally important.
Yeah.
And the one thing I forgot to mention that's also unique about our Lighthouse program is we're on for life. Once you become a child of Lighthouse, you're there for the rest of your life.
Okay.
So my young people are now in their 45s and 50s,
Wow.
and one's, on the mines and's got 3 homes up in Queensland, and another one's in the rag trade, the little boy I mentioned. He travels all over the world but lives in Vietnam and, makes jeans and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So, and last week we had an event where 2 of our young people got up and spoke, and one is at Monash Uni doing law. And she said, I really want an opportunity to get in, but it's so hard. We had 3 lawyers there and they're all fighting for her. And now she's going to go and watch a trial, and she's with one of the top. My friend happens to be about a magistrate, and he said, I'll help you, love it. And another one wanted to accounting, and an accounting firm, took them on. And so, it's really, as I said, you're like their mums and dads, and kids that go to private schools all have these fabulous networks. Ours don't. So you become our networks, and so you can help these young people and give them a hand up, and it's so important.
Yeah, amazing. Before we started recording, you did allude to the fact that you had a story that you wanted to share with our listeners and with us. And so why don't you share that with us now, Susan? You said it was going to be a story because you've got it written down, and that's okay. We'd love to hear it, and we'd love for our audience to hear it as well.
Thank you. This young man is now a disability worker and an artist, and loves writing. And he said, from the sterile isolation of the humidity crib to the first time I was finally held, a raw look at surviving the shadows of foster care and the invisible barriers we carry from birth. This is the story about the scrapbook of kindness that becomes the glue for a broken foundation. He wrote, a tiny child born into the world 10 weeks early. His first home was a box of plexiglass and the constant rhythmic hum of a humidity crib, a sterile cocoon where time was measured in oxygen levels and heart monitor pings. When he was finally released 10 weeks later, he wasn't the sturdy child most parents carry home. He was of a fragile weight, small enough to fit into the hollow of an adult palm. With lungs that struggled to pull life through a pinhole and a body racked by bronchiolitis, he fought. He held on to the gifted spark of light with everything he had, even as the cold air of the world tried to snuff it out. A fragile weight 10 weeks early, but finally held. This tiny child became a small toddler who was removed from his mother's care and then placed back into it, time and time again. A tennis match volley between horrific foster care placement and his mother's utter inability to care for herself, let alone me, a tiny child. He was slipping through the cracks of a system supported only by small moments of love, gifted to him by the heartstrings of carers who passed through his life in ever so brief moments. This child grew, and instead of learning about the love of a family, he learned how to spot an oncoming violent outburst and find the perfect hiding spot when the adults couldn't reach him, an escape artist after Houdini's own heart. He learned how to pack his favourite toys into a garbage bag as quickly as he could so he wouldn't leave them behind again when the workers showed up to bundle him into the car and on his way to his next foster placement. He learnt that the hardest part of every day was the shrill final ring of the school bell. As the classroom door swung open, it released a flood of children into the arms of waiting parents. A chaotic symphony of Velcro straps being tightened, bags being hoisted, and the soft, repetitive rhythm of, "How was your day?" His eyes would automatically sink to his scuffed shoes, tracing the worn laces as they could anchor him away from the heartbreak of witnessing a warmth he didn't share. He would walk towards the front gate, his small frame buffeted by the rush of families, hoping that the face waiting for him was in fact the same one that had dropped him off that morning, if there was a face waiting for him at all. He felt as though he was living in a completely different universe to his classmates. They complained about the toys they lacked or the current fads that were denied. Meanwhile, he sat a different kind of table. He learnt to wrap his arms protectively around his dinner plate in the evening, a physical shield to ensure his food wouldn't be stolen from under him. While other children were learning to share, he was learning the gravity of scarcity. This child, raised by chaos and violence, quickly learned how monumental a small gesture could be. He began to see the enormity in a kind smile shared between two strangers on the street he inhabited. To a boy who felt the world was a frozen place, a small act of warmth wasn't just a politeness, it was a lifeline for someone ready to find the emergency exit. Though he'd never truly experienced a traditional home, he began to build one internally. He cultivated a mental scrapbook every time he saw someone turn on a light for another person lost in the dark. He savoured those moments like a square of chocolate melting on his tongue, storing them up in a safe, quiet place of himself where the shadows couldn't reach. He studied the intricacies of every kindness he witnessed, using them as the glue to repair the cracks in his own foundation. He had been taught by the world to expect the fall, to become the very darkness that raised him. But he chose a different architecture. He learnt that to build a life, he had to rise every time the ground crumbled, and he had to shine every time the world went dark. He realised that the most important thing wasn't just surviving the fall, but refusing to let the light go out. That child eventually grew into an adult who decided, with every fibre of his being, to overcome. He chose to be a light for those who haven't learned to find their own yet. The act of kindness costs nothing to give, but its value can reshape a person's entire trajectory. To dig deep, no matter how thick that blanket of darkness gets. Make the choice to rise and to shine. We often overlook the small gestures, but as I've learned, they are the glue that hold a life together. So what is one small act of warmth you can do for the young people like me, who had time to not just survive, but thrive when I finally found my home at Lighthouse? And it reminds me of a story about two inheritances that I think might be interesting to you, that if you imagine two babies born exactly the same day in a hospital, equally precious and the same potential, but one leaves hospital very differently than the other. One inherits a loving family that have emotional security, financial inheritance perhaps, a mum and a dad that love them, university, food on the table, but not just the inheritance of money, but relationships, stability, confidence and opportunity. And the other one inherits homelessness. One begins 100 metres behind the start line and the others, hasn't even reached it. And so for these two children, the trajectory is going to be very different, as we heard in that young person's story.
Yeah.
And hopefully people remember that.
Yeah, exactly. I think a good time for us to pause and remember that our who we're born into is not something we have a choice on.
No.
We have a choice to be something different once that happens, but we don't get to choose who our family is. And, somebody hasn't chosen homelessness, particularly when they're tiny people. They don't choose to be part of that. And we have recently set up an office up in Sydney in the CBD, and we've never had an office in a CBD location. So we've always been in the Burundara area. It's a very wealthy part of the world, so it's not something where you see homeless people on the streets and things like that, and it's a very wealthy suburb in terms of private schools. But the streets of Sydney, walking around the streets of Sydney without, knowing what is up there. And you look around and you say, nobody's chosen this. They're in a place now, and they will set up their homes in places where they feel safe. And we should, as a community, should understand that if people feel safe where they are because they're in open places or they're in public, that is a good thing too, that people feel safe where we are. Like if we see homeless people come to places like Camberwell and Hawthorn and things like that, it's because they feel safe here, and that makes our communities better, I think, too.
And safer. And it reminds me, during COVID, we virtually solved homelessness.
We
and
housed
not many
people.
of them wanted to be on the streets.
No.
A few, you might have seen one or two. They were very
exactly.
grateful. They mightn't stay.
Yep.
So, where there's a will, they've solved homelessness.
Exactly.
In Qatar
We can do it.
Finland, we can do it.
Yeah.
What is it that is stopping us? And we need to confront ourselves and ask that question and say, why haven't we got the might of everyone joining together and saying this is not good enough, and particularly for people under 18. It's just criminal that's allowed to happen on our watch.
Yeah. And I think there are some, decent social activities going on where people are talking about setting up old office blocks and things like that and turning them into communities. It's not even just providing a room. Like that's what it is as well. It's about creating a community around people so they feel safe and they feel like they've got somebody to turn to, which I think that's one of the really precious things about what Lighthouse does. It's about giving people something that is theirs. It's love around, arms around them.
And sometimes the roof over the head's the easy part. It's the actual operational costs of feeding and having that team of people around them to make sure they've got that sense of family. That's what we don't invest in, that we need to invest in, because that's the key to then, the trajectory. Again, accountants know this. Why are we filling all our jails? I mean, what a waste. How many hundreds of thousands of that? Then, all you want is 50,000 at the beginning to, for a couple of years for one child to get them on their feet, make sure they get an education, and, we don't compound the disadvantage, we compound the investment.
Yep. And the government is talking about, there being a productivity issue in Australia and whatever, and we're taking people out of productivity and putting them in jails, because we can't,
Not just
it's a big business
now.
Yeah, it is. But that return on investment you talked about before, being an accountant on this, so it just, 12-time multiple on return on investment.
And all you have to do is care for people.
Most government projects are really happy if they get dollar for dollar return. So it just seems ludicrous that they shouldn't devote more effort to this area.
Yeah.
And again, I think, it's going back to us as human beings surrounding these young people in whatever way you can.
Yeah.
One little thing, it could be a cup of coffee of a $5 investment a week to coming on board as the chair of the organisation. There's the full gamut, and you only have to ring in and, I'll have a coffee with anyone. I'm, pretty easy going. We'll talk to anyone about, how they'd like to join us. We'd love that.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, I hope that this episode makes those phones ring for you. We will do all that we can to share everything like we have. The team really appreciated the Lighthouse team spending time with them and explaining to them the way the Lighthouse Foundation works as well. But thank you so much for joining us today, Susan. We've really appreciated your time, and we know that you've got so much going on in your life, and really looking forward to the Andrea Group team being part of what you're doing here at Lighthouse Foundation again, so that it isn't just you, and we're building a community together. So thank you so much for coming. We will share everything that we can, including upcoming events and anything that you would like us to. Just please let us know.
That's lovely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Q&A with S&A. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll be back again with another episode in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Andrea, for the support.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.